And we're live. Welcome anybody that's watching to the Sportable show, hot takes and hot cakes. We're answering fantasy football questions live and going over everything that's happening this morning. Dan, how are you?
Great, Matt. Glad to be here again. Pumped to do our second show. Just like Matt just said, this hangout's brought to you by Sportable. It's called Hot Takes and Hot Cakes. We're doing it every Sunday. We're going to answer all your questions. This time we're going to start off differently, too. We're going questions first and questions at the end, just so we make sure we get in every question. Point of this is to help you guys on Sundays answer some lineup decisions, give you some stats you might not know. Just to reiterate a little bit about both of us, I'll send it to Matt right after me. My name is Dan Schneier. I write for Pro Football Focus Fantasy. I write for Sportable NFL, which is an incredible site. I hope you guys decide to check it out after this if you're just getting onto it. We're run by a great guy, Sal, and you probably know him, 2QB, for his prowess in 2QB leagues, I should say. And then also the last website I write for a little bit is RotoViz, including regular football work for Fox Sports. So really we're tuned in. Matt can tell you his background too, a little bit.
Yeah, I staff writer at footballguys.com. That's kind of my main thing, and then I do a little scouting work for Optimum Scouting, scout college players, coming into the NFL and everything. And I also write for blackandbluereview.com, where I cover the Panthers there, and just a little bit of everything. Right at Sportable too, and host a podcast. Yeah, hey, this is our thing. This is what we do.
Yeah, the goal is basically to bring you some of the stuff that we've taken away from Pro Football Focus and from Football Guys, among the other sites. From Matt's scouting is unbelievable. It's got to help an immense amount. And basically just to give you some stats and different things you might not hear otherwise that can help your lineup decisions best.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're plugged in here. We're ready to go. And hey, I'm just happy football's back this second week. It's incredible. Everything is coming in fast, and there's a lot of stuff we got to get to. So,
all right, Matt, you want to kick it off? Yeah, go.
Yeah, sure. We got a few Twitter questions and everything. Few this morning that came through the wire. One is, should I play Alan Hurns? This is from Timothy Evans at BallsTim on Twitter, and he asks us, Hurns or Hawkins to replace Alshon Jeffrey? It's a 10-team standard league. So obviously he's asking Alan Hurns, the breakout Week 1 star, or Andrew Hawkins, who's the Browns' pretty much #1 receiver. Looks like Jordan Cameron's not going to play, so he'll be the top target today. Which one of them should he play to replace Alshon Jeffrey? Dan, do you have a good opinion on this?
This one I would say is definitely one of the tougher ones. I think it's going to come down to volume in the end, which makes a lot of sense why you would be interested in Hurns, because he's going. I mean, would you be interested in Hawkins? I'm sorry, because he's going against the New Orleans secondary that's shown vulnerability last week. Their corners are not all there yet. He won't be matched up with Keenan Lewis, who is their best corner by far at this point, and basically their only passable corner. He plays only on the outside. So he's going to see a lot of slot against maybe guys like Patrick Robinson, who did not perform well last weekend. And they've been trying to use a little Stanley Jean-Baptiste in there, the rookie. Had a few snaps last week, did not look good. So I think I'm just going to say that I'm going to lean towards Hawkins just based on the matchup here. I don't love the Hurns thing. I get what he did last week. I think he's definitely a decent talent, and Washington secondary is a mess right now for sure. But I just can't really predict the volume there with Marquise Lee probable, I'm sorry, and just with that offense a little bit stagnant. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, I'm actually going to recommend Hawkins too, and I like Hurns. I think he's a talented player. I think he played well last week for a little stretch there, and this is one of those things that kind of came over from the preseason, so that makes me think that he's not necessarily one of these Kevin Ogletree types, which I know everybody is kind of harping on as he was putting up big stats in Week 1 and everything. I think he's got a future, but for now, yeah, I would recommend Hawkins. Like I said, with Jordan Cameron most likely going to miss this game, he's going to be the Browns' top receiver, and it does kind of hurt that it's a standard league because I think Hawkins is going to be great in PPR leagues. He's going to get those receptions out of the slot. I really think he could be like a poor man's Julian Edelman pretty much throughout this year. I think he can be sort of a nice flex play in PPR leagues. But, even though it's a standard, I would side with volume. When you're replacing a star like like Alshon Jeffrey. I mean, that's going to be a big deal every time. So yeah, I think I agree with you, Dan. I think Hawkins is the play.
All right, Hawkins it is.
All right, so yeah, Tim, just throw Hawkins in there. A couple other questions I got. This is from Paul Trammell at Trammell Paul. Should I sit Jay Cutler today? Well, I mean, it really depends. For me, it depends on your other options, but I'm guessing that you probably don't have a better option than Cutler. I know he had, a typical, bad Jay week last time against the Bills, and that was very surprising. But I'm still going to play Cutler, even though he might miss. He looks like he's going to miss Jeffrey, and potentially Marshall might be out as well. Brandon Marshall, that is. I'm still going to play Cutler. I don't think that San Francisco defense is what it used to be. I know they look good against Tony Romo, but I think that had more to do with Romo than what the Niners were doing. Yeah, that could be. He could surprise a few people, and I might be crazy here, but I still have a little bit of faith in Santonio Holmes too to make a few plays. The Bears signed him late, and I think he could probably get going tonight. I still play Cutler, but again, it really depends on your other options. But I just don't feel like you're probably going to have an option better than Cutler. What about you, Dan? Do you disagree?
Yeah, I mean, I think this one all depends on the context, really. If you had made the action early enough on the week, there's a good chance you may have been able to acquire Jake Locker or Andy Dalton, who were floating around a lot of waiver wires in one QB leagues, especially ones with shallower benches, maybe 16 total roster spots with only 6 or 7 bench. If you're able to pick up one of those guys in both of their matchups, Dalton and Lockers, to be honest, I would go with either Dalton or Locker over Cutler, just because I'm more so worried, less so about the San Francisco 49ers defense, which I actually agree almost 100% on with Matt and will be exposed at some point, but more so with the fact that I'm worried about the potential for Jeffrey and Marshall not to play, or for the potential for them to be not at full strength, and Jay Cutler's just not the fantasy quarterback without them both. Yes, he's great in that system, and I think he's better than people think in general, but I think a lot of it has to do with having Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey, and it can't hurt to have those guys. So, again, if you have the option to do it, if you have two of the top matchup guys like Dalton or Locker this week, go ahead. Otherwise, I would pass as well. I would start Cutler, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, here we go. We just got a question as we were talking about this from Nate Smith at @what_a_Nate on Twitter, and he asked us Cutler versus San Francisco or Cam versus Detroit. So
wow.
Let's talk about that scenario there. I mean, do you sit Cutler for Cam Newton coming off an injury against the Lions this week?
For me, there's no way I can play Cam this week. I didn't love what I saw from that Carolina interior line last week. I really think they're still working around stuff. Yeah, the outside looked great. Byron Bell, for example, had a great game at tackle, but from what I read. But the point is, the rest of them, that interior just still does. I'm still not sure about it. And now you're going against Ndamukong Suh, you're going against Nick Fairley, you're going against Ziggy Ansah. It's an active front four and one that completely dominated the Giants last week to the point where they couldn't really get many plays off. So I'm not going to trust Cam with this offensive line against this defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I would play Cutler over Cam Newton in this situation. I think Cam will be fine long term. I'm not worried about it. But for this week, yeah, I mean it's I really wouldn't want to be a quarterback coming off injury then going against all those guys, especially Cam was kind of poking the bear a little with a few of his comments about Ndamukong Suh this week, and that's that's fine. I love a little gamesmanship, but yeah, he might get beat around a few times today, so we'll definitely have to watch that. That could be a mess.
While we're on it real quick, Matt, actually, you want to give a little insight into how that Carolina offensive line played? It was a huge topic that I was interested in this offseason. I know you're way more tuned into it than I am, so if you got anything on the line, let me know.
Yeah, sure. Actually, it was a little surprisingly. They played surprisingly well. I was impressed with it was a little. I mean, of course there were some gaffes. No doubt about it. There, especially on the interior, a few of the guards. Had some missteps, and I think they were swapping out Trey Turner and Francisco or Velasco.
Yep.
His name is. Yeah, they were swapping them out at right guard a little bit, and in general, I think that's not always the best idea. I think with the line, you need to have all 5 guys out there consistently building chemistry and everything like that. but you know, I thought they played well, especially late in the game. You know, they really started getting D'Angelo Williams going, so that was nice to see. And especially out at the tackles, you really didn't notice a ton of pressure on Derek Anderson, especially Byron Bell. I thought he played really well. He essentially locked down Michael Johnson, you know, the Bucs' big free agent defensive end, and you know he's more of a run stopper than a pass rusher, anyways. But you know, I thought they played well, and so there's a little bit of hope there. I just think that this unit is so much more overwhelming than what they saw in week one, even with, you know, a player like Gerald McCoy. I think that there's going to be a few missteps this week, but yeah, they played well even in the running game. You know, you're not crazy about any of those running backs right now, but the line doesn't appear to be the total nightmare that it could have been, at least for 1 week.
Good stuff, Matt. You guys should definitely be listening up to that. He's tuned in, right? Like you mentioned earlier, he writes for Black and Blue Review. Incredible Carolina Panthers site, one I came across before Matt even mentioned it to me. Really just really in-depth stuff, better than most of the Panthers stuff I see out there. So good stuff, Matt. Definitely, let's move on to the next one, too.
Appreciate it. And yeah, BBR is great. Bill does a great job there. I'm very grateful he's letting me do. Another question we got. This is from Sunil John at Sunil John 79. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Does RG3 bounce back this week after last week's mediocre performance? What do you say to that, Dan?
All right, so I've been very down on RG3 from the start of things. This has started from my coverage in the preseason, paying attention really closely to Washington, because Washington's a team that I follow a lot in the preseason because I cover them for Fox Sports. Anyway, point is, I don't like his fit in Jay Gruden's system right now, and I don't like the footwork I see from him. He's throwing off his back foot a lot, and he's not set. I never really loved his zip and his drive on the seams and out passes coming into the NFL. Always thought that would eventually be a problem if he's in this type of offense, a pro-style spread offense where he's not really using his feet as much as he is right now. They ran 0 zone read plays last week. So now you've got RG3 with an offensive line that made the transition from the zone blocking scheme under Shanahan to Gruden's scheme, which features a lot more power blocking, and it's really just not working very well in the passing game right now. They gave up a ton of pressure last week, and that was to Houston's front four, which is certainly a little stronger than Jacksonville's. But I will take Gus Bradley's scheme potentially over the one run in Texans. I forgot who their defensive coordinator is. I'm blanking on it right now, but. Point is, I think that Jackson.
Romeo Crennel.
There we go. It's Crennel. Yep. Game over. Thank you, Matt. So, point is, I think that they're going to get a lot of pressure, Jacksonville. They're going to have a lot of defensive success, and I think RG3 is unstartable until we see him in a better matchup where he's facing a weak defensive line.
You know what? I really agree with that. The Eagles seem to. I mean, they didn't show up on the box score, but when you watch the film and everything, you know, they had receivers running wide open on that Jacksonville defense. The secondary might be a bit more of a question mark. But, yeah, I mean, they have a swarming defensive line, and they played well last week, and in the preseason they look great too. You know, a lot of people don't know about Derrick Marks, their defensive tackle, but he's played really well since coming to Jacksonville. You know, he's really upped his game, and especially as an interior, you know, pocket pusher and everything. And he could really give RG3 trouble for sure. You know, he just looks like a guy right now who's just not comfortable out there. There just seems to be this disconnect between, you know, what his mind wants to do and what his body wants to let him do, which is a really tough situation. I think he's still kind of getting over that knee injury. And I think a lot of people forget, too, that was his second time tearing that ACL. And you know, it's a tough thing to get past as an athlete, and especially one that relied on his physical gifts so much as a rookie. So, yeah, I agree with Dan. I'm not starting RG3 until he kind of shows us that he's even a fraction of that player that he was in his rookie year. And right now I just don't see that. So I agree with Dan there.
I'm really glad you mentioned some Derrick Marks there, Matt. He was a great, underrated, under-the-radar free agent addition, and I read a great stat from Pro Football Focus this week that he had 7. I forgot how many of the exact numbers. I gotta find the tweet now, but he was 3rd or 4th in the league in just total pressures last week, and he was up there with with another one of the Jaguars that I'm just forgetting the name. So I think that he's gonna have a big game on the interior. So I'm glad you mentioned that, and I think he'll be disruptive all game.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think that's he's an under the radar player who's really good. But anyways, another question we got while we were talking. So this is from AJ on Twitter at AJ underscore PFS. Charles Clay or Kobe Fleener this week? Oh man, I mean, and for me, I will always I'll take almost any alternative to Kobe Fleener. Charles Clay, he's got a pretty decent matchup against the Bills this week. They really are kind of hurting for players to cover the tight end. They don't have any real great coverage linebackers. With Kiko Alonso being hurt, I think that's a good matchup. And we didn't really get to see it in week 1, but that offense that they're running, which is really similar to the Eagles with Chip Kelly, they really do a lot to scheme the tight end open, and I think that we're going to kind of see that a little more this week from Charles Clay. I think he's a pretty good tight end streaming option, and Kobe Fleener he's terrible. I mean, I don't like to say this about football players too much, but I mean, he's bad. He's really just a bad football player. Almost, when you watch Colts games, we'll get to see them on Monday night. He's just one of those guys like, why are you throwing a Kobe Fleener? Of all the players you have there, like, just what a wasted. That's like every target that Kobe Fleener gets is like a waste of a play. I mean, for just how, I mean, he's a very physically gifted player, but I mean, he's just like he's bad. He's really soft and he's just a mess. So
I hate to tell you, AJ, but I'm actually agreeing 100% with Matt here. From everything I've done with football and everything I've studied, Kobe Fleener is not a good football player, and also, more importantly, not a great fantasy option going forward. If you obviously watched last week's game and you saw the explosive play from Dwayne Allen where he caught the out pass and just took it down the sideline. Allen was one of my favorite prospects coming out. I can tell you a few reasons why I would go Clay over Fleener here. Matt touched on a few of the best, but one other reason is the game flow of the Colts-Eagles games. It's likely that the Eagles are going to push for a lead, get up, and get that early lead, and the Colts are going to have to go to more 11 personnel, and which means they're going to feature 3 wide receivers: Akeem Nicks, Reggie Wayne, and T.Y. Hilton, and only 1 tight end. Now, if they're going to put 1 tight end in, it's more than likely going to be Dwayne Allen, not only because he's probably a better receiver at this point, and I shouldn't even really say probably, he is a better option as a receiver, but more importantly, he can block. So they're not going to put in Fleener as an inline tight end in those formations. So I think you got to stay away from Fleener at all costs this week. And as far as Charles Clay goes, really Matt made a great point. The Bills are ready. Someone is going to explode against that Bills pass defense very soon. You saw last week Martellus Bennett destroyed them at tight end. After losing Kiko Alonso, we mentioned this on the last show. Kiko Alonso was their 3rd best coverage guy last year. Jairus Byrd was their best. Neither is there, so they don't have their safety or best cover linebacker. Something will happen soon as far as tight ends go, and Martellus Bennett got it started. So, yeah, I'm going Clay.
No doubt about it. And just a few more bag on to Kobe Fleener things. I mean, this is the one thing that you do have to worry about when because I think a lot of us in the fantasy community and in the NFL community in general can see that Dwayne Allen is the better option and that Kobe Fleener is not a good football player. But I mean, you can never count. We've seen at this point you can never count on Pep Hamilton to do the right thing. So Fleener might continue to get targets, but you don't want to waste your time there. And yeah, so I think Clay is definitely the call. I think we obviously agree on that. And he's a good streaming option in daily fantasy leagues. And we're going to have TJ Hernandez on the show today after we get done with these quick Twitter questions, and he'll be able to answer able to answer any daily fantasy football questions. So please start sending those this way. Another few questions that we've got while we were on the air. Dwayne Allen or Travis Kelsey? He's actually, this guy, Man in Denver, Man in Denver 5280, is actually replying to the Charles Clay or Kobe Fleener question. He asked Dwayne Allen or Travis Kelsey. That's the better, is that the better question? Right. Yeah, I think those are actually I think those are superior options. Who do you think is the better call between the two of those, Dwayne Allen or Travis Kelsey?
So it's an interesting situation because both of them are dealing with volume concerns. Last week, Travis Kelsey had 3 catches for 43 yards on I think what was 16 snaps, which is just insane. Difference is this week they're going against the Broncos. I expect the Broncos to have the ball for most of the game. and control the clock, which is going to be a major issue for Kansas City. Their offense just might not get on the field enough. Quite simply, their defense is miserable right now. It doesn't look like the defense we saw last year from the Chiefs. So now, granted, you can say the same thing about the Eagles versus Colts game, but Pat Thorman did a great piece this week on snaps and stats, and he found out that the Eagles ran the second most plays last week with 82, and number 2 was the Jaguars with 82. I mean, number 3, the third most plays was the Jaguars with 82. So, I mean, their opponents are running similar offensive plays just based on the speed of the game that the Eagles are creating. So I think you got to go with Fleener here. I mean, never Fleener. Don't ever go with Kobe Fleener. You got to go with Dwayne Allen here because I think that there's just a little more opportunity still. I love Kelsey. I'm waiting for the breakout too, and Reed wants to get him more involved, but we need more than 16 snaps, or at least a guarantee that there will be more.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything Dan just said. You know, the good thing about Travis Kelsey is he did produce in limited snaps, and you know, the good thing about when teams play Denver is, you know, they have to throw the ball, they have to play catch-up mode. So maybe Kelsey, you know, he gets an explosive playoff in garbage time. I mean, it sounds like we agree that the Chiefs are not going to be competitive in this game. So that will definitely lead to a few more pass-catching opportunities for Kelsey. And it was nice to hear Andy Reid admit, you know, publicly that, yeah, I messed up by only giving Kelsey those few amount of snaps and They ran a great creative tight end screen, and then they ran it to Anthony Fasano. It was like, oh my God, why? Why would you do that? You had a great play design and you ran it to the wrong player.
Oh.
But anyways, so, you know, I think Kelsey is a good kind of upside maybe in a daily fantasy, you know, GPP tournament and everything. You know, you want to be a contrarian, you put Kelsey in there for cheap, or if, you know, you have a great solid lineup and you're looking for that one push over the edge, I think Kelsey could potentially be that, you know, boom or bust play. But I think Allen is the safer option at this point. But even he's not really a great guarantee to always produce like he did last week because, you know, it's like, as we mentioned, Pep Hamilton.
Yeah.
You know, no, I don't want to trust Pep to do the right thing ever, and, you know, he still might put Kobe Fleener on the field. And
yeah,
I think that's becoming this show's motto is, you know, the anti-Kobe Fleener show. Never ever play Kobe Fleener.
Don't play him.
Yeah, so if he goes off for 7 catches and 98 yards and a touchdown tomorrow, you can never watch our show again. But
since he won't do that, you can watch it again.
Yeah,
we're sure that he won't do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, so another question we've got while we were on the air, which is great. We've got plenty of questions flying in. At 52. Dank B52, or I don't know what that means, or what this is. But anyways, Benny D on Twitter asked us, would you trade C.J. Spiller straight up for Randall Cobb in fantasy football? So what do you think? C.J. Spiller for Randall Cobb, straight up.
Yeah, so I've been going back and forth on Spiller for a while. It is a tough situation to figure out there. I like his talent a lot. 2 years ago, he was unbelievable. But I think that I would snap this one up quick before you lose it, because Cobb is just a more reliable player than C.J. Spiller. For Spiller, you have to worry about workload week to week, which is going to depend entirely on the game flow, and basically it sounds like whether they're up, because when they're down, they're going to use Fred Jackson more as the passing down back. It's what they've done. And the other issue with Spiller is he's shown that he's a little bit injury prone in the past. You're playing with fire with Spiller. I think he had a great first week. Was aided a lot by that touchdown in the passing game, which was like from 5 yards away in the red zone, which was nice to see a red zone target, but take away that touchdown, not as good a game. Yeah, I think you got to take Cobb. Cobb is one of those weird guys that proves that you can score touchdowns while you're under 6 feet tall. I never will understand him watching him play, but Aaron Rodgers targets him so much in the red zone. It's unbelievable. It was a player I somewhat slept on because of his size issue. I don't love drafting small wide receivers. It's proven over time it's not the best strategy, but Cobb defies all logic. He gets open in the red zone, and Rodgers finds him eventually, just with that whip of an arm. So, yeah, I think snap this one up.
You know, I'm going to kind of disagree with Dan here.
Great.
Yeah, so that's nice, I guess. We can disagree
finally
on something. Yeah, so I'm gonna disagree here, and I'm gonna say keep C.J. Spiller. I just, you know, I think running backs are so hard to come by in fantasy football, and there's a lot of good wide receivers this year, and I still think that, come season's end, Cobb will finish, outside the top 10 at least. Like Dan mentioned, I don't really like to build my team around small wide receivers. I mean, and this is totally separate discussion from real football and fantasy football. There's plenty of good small wide receivers that are NFL players, but when it comes to fantasy options, I want to build around not only, big receivers, but also guys that are their team's top target. And Cobb is, I think, still definitely the secondary guy to Jordy Nelson there, who's the far superior player in my opinion. And so I'm going to hold on Spiller and see what we get out of him. Yeah, he might get injured, and Fred Jackson's still there, and even Anthony Dixon is getting some carries in Buffalo. But at the same time, running backs are just such a rare commodity, and Spiller got fed in week 1 like they always kind of promised us he would. So that's an encouraging sign to me. I'm going to hold on Spiller and see if we can keep getting that running back 1 sort of value out of him. So I'm going to go the opposite way from Dan there.
All right. That's fair enough. I like the points you made, so I can't really argue with them.
Well, hey, here we are. Okay, we got a few more questions that we got throughout the week. So if we got one from Dr_GI, and he says, since Adrian Peterson is deactivated this week, should I start Darren McFadden or Toby Gerhart? What do you think, Dan?
So I think that you're going to have to go with Gerhart here. Yes, he's injured. Yes, that offensive line looked miserable last week, which really was not a surprise to me after signing Zane Beadles, who I thought was just a terrible, terrible guard. With the Broncos and not fit for what Jacksonville wants to do in the run game. But this is a Washington defense that is going to get very, very miserable very soon. You have Barry Cofield, their nose tackle and one technique, who has pretty much been holding down their defensive line from an interior standpoint. And he's now out for he's short-term IR. He won't be back until later, way later into the season. So you're running with 2 new inside linebackers. Well, one, I'm sorry. You're running with Keenan Robinson, who won the job at inside linebacker this preseason. He's not a good talent. He did not have a strong first week. And on the other spot inside, Perry Riley, who's not really a good player, but they re-signed him anyway. So you are just, and they don't really have a safety to come down into the box and make plays in the run game. This is a defense that will be exploited all season in fantasy football. Texans did a decent number on them. That's not really even close to the caliber of game we're going to see on them because the Texans are one of the worst offenses, I think, or at least in the bottom half. So really, to me, this is just a matchup thing. I don't love Gerhart. I don't love the offensive line, but his matchup is just too good for me to pass on. What are your thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, given the 2 options, I think that Gerhart is the way to go. Especially we just know he's going to get a ton of volume, when he's out on the field, and it looks like he's not, too banged up. He did get injured last week, and I think that's a situation to monitor. But I think he's just the safer play is to go with Gerhart. I wouldn't be totally surprised if McFadden had a passable week. If he actually, I think that, again, we keep bringing up daily fantasy, and we're going to have TJ Hernandez, so maybe this is another good question to ask him. I think McFadden is kind of a good, contrarian play in daily fantasy this week because, he's going to get a lot of the touches, and he is still a talented player. It's more of a question of durability with him. So I think he could be a nice play, but given the option, I'm going to go with Toby Gerhart. Okay, so we've settled that one. Here's another. Here's one, and this question is really interesting to me. And this is at tbuckler5 on Twitter, and he asks us, I traded Richardson, and I'm assuming that's Trent Richardson, and Andre Johnson for Wes Welker and Doug Martin. Peyton Manning is my quarterback, and my backs struggle. Is that a good trade? What do you think, Dan? Because I want to hear your answer before I weigh in on this. Who do you think got the better end of that trade?
Yeah, so Tommy, obviously you probably saw I replied to you on Twitter, so I'm just going to kind of reiterate what I said there. I actually don't love the side of the trade you made. For me, I think Andre Johnson is the best player in this trade. I think Welker can return some decent wide receiver 2-3 value. I'm not as high on Welker as other people are, mostly because I just don't know when that next concussion is coming. and I know it will be coming at some point, and then what are you going to do? So I don't love giving the best player in this trade, but I will say this. At least Martin has more upside than Richardson. Richardson, we saw a big, interesting. The most interesting thing I think I saw from Week 1 was the fact that Trent Richardson played 30 snaps and Bradshaw played 45. And it's even more skewed towards once the Colts went behind, it was almost entirely the Bradshaw show. So we're looking at a situation with Trent Richardson where I think that the only time you're ever going to get a really good game out of him, or even a passable game out of him, is when the Colts have a big lead. And even then I'm worried just based on how he's running behind that line. So getting rid of Trent Richardson, awesome. I'm happy you did it. I would love to get rid of him, and if I don't have him in any leagues, but if I did, I would love to get rid of him myself as fast as possible. But I think Andre Johnson may end up being the best player in this deal. What are your thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I'm actually almost completely with you on this. I do think that I don't like the trade because you're giving up Andre Johnson, and I think he's going to be a surefire wide receiver one. I can't believe how he was going in the 4th round of some fantasy drafts, back in August and even before that. And I know he has Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's terrible. He's a terrible quarterback. I don't want to hear any more arguments about it. He's not a good football player, and I know he's his quarterback, but give Fitzpatrick some credit that he can keep his he does keep his pass catchers viable, and he will feed a top guy like Andre Johnson a lot, and I think he's going to rack up a ton of receptions. So yeah, I think Andre Johnson's the best player in this deal by far, and again agree with Richardson is just a cancer right now to his real life team and anybody's fantasy teams, because he's a guy like, I drafted him in the 5th round, I should probably start him. No. And honestly, I said this week that the Colts would be better if they probably just outright cut him. They're not going to, but he's just such a mess to their team right now. He disrupts everything. And Bradshaw's just playing better than him, and Bradshaw's an older player. Everything, yeah. So I love getting rid of Trent Richardson too. But at the same time, yeah, and I don't really like the players that you got. Wes Welker, he'll probably produce some usable weeks, but yeah, we mentioned the concussion issues and this whole drug policy thing that's been going on. I don't know exactly. I mean, he's not getting on the field this week, so probably next week, but still, that kind of gives me pause. And I don't know. I think he's a declining player, and he's one concussion away from having to hang the cleats up. And Doug Martin especially. I wish I had stayed on my don't draft Doug Martin take for the whole summer. But
the Mankins trade killed you, didn't it? It killed me too.
It did. Yeah, I think
I
it did.
The Mankins trade. I wanted Martin after that trade. I did.
Yeah, for sure. And Charles Sims going down too was
that was even bigger. That was greedy.
Yeah. That was the start of it, and then it even got so exactly. I wish I had stayed on my don't draft Martin take, because he had 9 carries for 9 yards last week. Mankins played a few snaps and got hurt, and it just looked like the mess that it could have been. And is he going to play this week for sure? Do we know if he's definitely playing this week? I hadn't seen if it was confirmed yet, but So anyways,
confirmed.
Yeah. So anyways, Martin for me is just, I don't think he's going to return you great value. So I just wouldn't have given Johnson up in the trade. I don't really like it from that perspective. Okay, so we've settled that.
I got to cut in real quick and get to a question we just got in. I think some people will appreciate this. So at Joey Hammers, Joey Bag of Hammers is his Twitter name. Is Phil Dawson the clear #1 kicker this week? Now, there's a little context behind this question, so I'm going to get to it, and I think that's what people will appreciate it. Actually, Joey Hammers is my boy. He's asking me this question because we eliminated kickers from our league for the first time with the league vote. So as we were watching Red Zone last week, the whole time as somebody got lined up for a kick, you'd go, is he on your team? Is that your kicker? Who has him? Who is Phil Dawson? Who has blah, blah. So it's great. It was just a good joke. And it dates even back further with Hammers to our first ever auction in fantasy football when none of us really had any clue what an auction draft was. And he ended up with $23 left at the end and only a kicker spot to fill. So he threw it out there. Phil Dawson, $23. And then everybody just exploded in the room. So this one's for you, Joey Matta, Joey Hammers. Great question. I hope you can enjoy Dawson killing it this year, but he won't be scoring any points in our leagues because we have eliminated kickers. And by the way, Matt, I can't feel any better about the decision to get rid of kickers. I don't need them. I'm so glad I'm not seeing them scoring points in my box scores anymore. I'm just ruining things that one way or the other for me or against me. Don't care, don't need them. Done with them.
I totally agree. I'm proud of you and your friends for taking that useless part of fantasy football out of the game. Yeah, that's another campaign we could start on the show is get kickers out of fantasy football.
Don't ever play for Kobe Fleener and get rid of kickers. There's two things we want you to take.
There it is. Perfect. All right, so let's get to our last question before we get into the content here, and we'll circle back around at the end of the show and answer any questions. So feel free to send them in if you're watching. We'll get to them. Okay, Green, Asiata, and I'll give first names here. Sean Green, Matt Asiata, Eric Decker, Trent Richardson, Doug Martin, and Brandon Cooks. Need two of them to start. Non-PPR thoughts. Advice always appreciated. Okay, so we've got Sean Green, Matt Asiata, Eric Decker, Trent Richardson, Doug Martin, and Brandon Cooks. We need two of them to T. Buckler, the same guy that asked us the last question. So what do you think, Dan?
All right, Tommy. Again, I didn't get a chance to answer one on Twitter, sorry, so now I'll answer it here. So I want to start by putting out there the first guy I'm going to go with is Eric Decker. I love Decker coming into the season. I think Decker's just a very underrated NFL talent. He's 6'2", 215, ran like a 4.5, gets better separation than people think, and is better as a deep ball threat than people think. He's also very strong at the point of the catch. He's just a really good player. He didn't break out last week. I thought he would against the Raiders secondary. I think that had more to do with the fact that the Jets were running the ball successfully. He still had a nice game, 5 for 74, I think it was. This week he's going to have a much better chance, I think, against the Packers secondary that really just doesn't get it. They try to change things every year, but the one thing they haven't changed is defensive coordinator Dom Capers. And if you talk to any Packers fans, they'll all tell you the same thing. They hate Capers. They can't believe he's still there. They have no idea what McCarthy's doing keeping him there. His schemes are not working. They haven't been for a while. So I think you're going to get a great game out of Decker. Moving on to the second guy, this is where it gets tougher. As we mentioned, we have no idea what Martin's status is yet. We're going to have to keep checking back for that. I don't love him either way. I think I'm actually leaning towards Asiata here just because of a volume and bulk standpoint. Don't love the matchup with the Patriots, but they prove they're a little bit vulnerable in the run game against the Dolphins. And I think that it's just a pure volume thing. I don't like Cooks as much this week with Kenny Stills coming back. That was the reason I didn't love drafting him in the first place. And you know what? I take that back. Sorry, no Asiata. Let's go with Sean Green. A little change up at the end. I thought about it a little more, and I realized the matchup is so juicy against Dallas, so juicy that I think you can get production out of Green along with several other Titans. But yeah, so I changed it. I'm going to go Sean Green and Eric Decker. Matt, your thoughts?
Well, we know that we're not going to tell you to start Trent Richardson, so that's that.
Yeah, that's for sure.
He's the way. I'm actually, as one of the fantasy analysts out there that hates running backs, and then that's a fact. You can look at all my teams and know I hate running backs. I never draft running backs. I'm going to tell you to start Eric Decker. That's the obvious one to me. He like Dan mentioned, he's a big guy, top target on his team's passing game. I think that's he's a startable player every week in my opinion. And I'm actually going to go with Brandon Cooks. I love what I saw week one. And he's a good player. I mean, he's a better player than Sean Green and Matt Asiata. And I know that's not what it's always about in fantasy football, but I actually with playing Cleveland, somebody's going to eliminate Joe Hayden, or he's going to play on a certain Saints player, but I don't think it's going to be Brandon Cooks. I don't think we saw last week a small, speedy, shifty wide receiver in Antonio Brown give Hayden a lot of trouble. He tends to struggle with those sort of players more than bigger guys, and so I think Cooks either way is going to have a nice game. I'm still excited about him. I'm not just ready to write him off as that was his ceiling last week. I still think that he can have plenty of usable games. So I'm going to go with Cooks and Eric Decker, because starting running backs is the worst idea you can ever have. But anyways, yeah. All right, so we're done with Twitter questions right now. Feel free to send us more in, or we're about to talk daily fantasy. We have TJ Hernandez on the show with us. So if you have daily questions, you can send them in now, or if not, just regular questions. TJ, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
What's going on, Tej?
Nothing much. Just trying to frantically set some lineups, some
Yeah.
tourney lineups before everything gets rolling. Sorry, sorry. Just trying to get this switched up right here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was getting some super weird feedback. I had Michael Floyd in half of my DraftKings lineups, so I had to do some adjusting there when I woke up because of Carson Palmer. Even if Carson Palmer does play, it looks like things might be a little iffy over there. So I'm kind of fading all of my Cardinals, everyone in the Cardinals passing game at this point, in all my daily lineups.
Oh, no.
Yeah, just to reiterate, guys, TJ is a daily fantasy guru, I would say. He knows it way better than me and Matt know it. We're all trying to get into it, obviously. We all know football, but this guy's killing it. He's here to give you daily advice, so keep talking, TJ. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, if you guys just want to talk a little bit of DraftKings lineups.
Yeah, sure.
So one of the best plays I think across the industry is Aaron Rodgers. He's only 7,900 on DraftKings this week. That makes him, I want to say, the seventh price quarterback on the site, which is a really good value. He's at home, coming off of a bad game at Seattle, but they should be really, really good at home. I think that whole Packers offense is in play on daily sites today. Eddie Lacy's only priced at 6,000 on DraftKings, which probably had a little to do with his injury concerns earlier in the week, but he should be a go. And then all of their receivers obviously in play. I believe that Boykin is mid-price, which is going to be a really good value if you want to punt wide receiver, just because he was locked up by Sherman, basically as a decoy last week. And then if you're looking to stack Aaron Rodgers this week on DraftKings in your GPPs, I actually prefer stacking him with Randall Cobb over Jordy Nelson for a couple reasons. Jordy's probably going to be the popular stack, so it gives you a little bit of a contrarian play. And then if you look at Fantasy Outsiders versus number 2 wide receiver stats from last year, Jets were actually the worst in the league against number 2 wide receivers as far as yards allowed per game. So you can still kind of look at last year's stats since it's so early, and that stat on Fantasy Outsiders is a really good guide. I'm sorry, they were the second worst. San Diego was the first worst. So that's a really good stat to use to look for some off the board plays at wide receiver, and especially when there's a clear number 1 wide receiver on the team. So Randall Cobb is a nice play today. I think he's going to have a really big game.
Awesome.
Another player that I really like, if you look at that stat, for a little off-the-board wide receiver, San Diego was worse in the league last year against number 2 wide receivers. Doug Baldwin could have a nice game today. I don't know if you would consider Michael Floyd the number 2 wide receiver still behind Larry Fitzgerald, but San Diego did struggle against him last week, so that could be a really interesting play. Looking at running backs, Monte Ball and Arian Foster are my 2 favorite values at running back this week on DraftKings. Monte Ball's priced at 6,800. Arian Foster's priced at 7,000. They're both should be in really positive game scripts. We saw Monte Ball last week. He got the bulk of the carries. I know there were a little bit of questions going in how much work he was going to get. He played 85% of the snaps and got 25 touches. Arian Foster played 93% of the snaps, got 29 touches, and the Raiders were awful against running backs last week. I think that Chris Ivory and Chris Johnson combined for over 200 yards total yardage, and then they each got a touchdown. So Arian Foster's a really nice play this week. Going to wide receiver, Marcus Colston across the whole industry. Marcus Colston's pretty underpriced. He's 5,400 on DraftKings. I like him if you're looking for for a mid-price wide receiver in your cash games, I like him a lot. I don't think that they're going to be able to match up Joe Hayden on any one wide receiver in the in the Saints passing game. Um, he lined up. Marcus Colston was in the slot, I think, on almost 80% of his snaps last week. I'm sorry, 65% of his snaps last week. So that's going to make it pretty difficult for Hayden to just lock in on him this week. And I think he makes for a really nice play at $5,400. Damaris Thomas is another receiver. He's priced at $7,000. That's obviously a game that they're favored by 13 points, and they should be throwing the ball all over the field on the Chiefs this week. And Damaris Thomas coming off of a pretty bad game last week, but he was actually really heavily targeted throughout the game and in the red zone. I think he had 4 red zone targets. He just wasn't able to convert. So the prices are super reactionary on DraftKings this week, which is pretty surprising. So there's a lot of really good values. Same thing with Jamal Charles, a super reactionary price drop to last week. He only had 11 touches. He's going to be a big part of their offense all the time. Andy Reid said he wants to correct it. Even though they're 13-point underdogs, Jamal Charles isn't going to be affected by game script too much. He's pretty much their number 1 receiver and running back. So regardless of how that game plays out, Jamal Charles should see his touches back towards 20 touch mark. Anytime you can get 20 touches out of Jamal for only $7,400, that's something that you should probably try to get in your lineups. I have him in half of my DraftKings cash games.
Nice.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stats right there.
Real quick, let me ask you 2 things here, TJ, while we have you. One, you mentioned control there without any context about 6 or 7 times before you came on. Just put a little context behind that.
Meaning the contrarian plays?
TJ, yeah.
Yeah,
just, kind of explain what that means.
Yeah, sure. So when you're playing in GPPs or these large field tournaments, a lot of times it really just comes down to off the board play that everybody isn't on. You kind of want to go against the grain because that's how you're really going to separate yourself in these large field tournaments. A lot of times it just comes down to one player. So if you can find that player that like I think everyone is going to be targeting Jordy Nelson, and I mentioned Randall Cobb. If that can be kind of where you're zigging when everyone else is zagging, that's how you're going to separate yourself in those large fields. I mean, when you're competing against thousands and thousands of people, a lot of times it'll come down to that one player. So, like I said, using that fantasy outsider stat, defenses against number 2 wide receivers can point you to someone. Like this week, a Doug Baldwin is someone that's priced at 3,400. San Diego's bad against number 2 wide receivers. That's someone, if that guy gets you 2 touchdowns, then that could really catapult you up the leaderboard, because a lot of these value plays are going to be pretty commonly used. So you want to find those players that are going to get you some touchdowns that no one else is playing. That's really what shoots you to the top. Same with running backs. If you can find those cheap running backs that have the touchdown upside, a lot of times people, Chris Raybon's done on 4for4's a lot of great work on this. You really want to look for touchdown upside. A lot of time people mistake running back upside with someone that could break a big play, but you just can't predict that. So someone like the best example is probably Fred Jackson. He's always pretty cheap, but he gets a lot of goal line work, and he actually catches the ball a lot. People generally think C.J. Spiller is the best pass catcher in that backfield, but Fred Jackson gets a lot of targets and he gets a lot of goal line work. He's always priced really cheap on the daily sites, so he's a really nice guy to target, especially this week at only 4,000. Another cheap running back that's kind of against the grain, Sean Green, is only $3,300, and he's going to get a lot of the touches. I don't think they're going to start working in any of their other backs too much yet, and he can definitely get a shot at a touchdown or 2 against that Dallas defense. So trying to go against the grain is basically what I mean when saying contrarian plays. And I'm kind of glad we're on that subject because there's actually going to be an opportunity to go really contrarian today if you want to implement DraftKings swap feature. So I'll try to explain this without getting too convoluted, but everyone's going to be fading Alshon and Brandon Marshall today because they're expected to not play. But inactives aren't going to be official usually till 30 minutes before the game. So if either one of those guys plays, you're really going to want to get them in your lineups, especially if it's just Brandon Marshall or just Alshon, because no one's going to have them on their team. So something you can do today is you can roster Martellus Bennett, the Chicago Bears tight end, and Jeremy Maclin, the receiver for the Eagles, because they're both playing late. So if you look at their salaries, Martellus Bennett's $5,600 and Macklin's 6,100. So you have $11,700 in salary between those two. Now stay with me here. If they announce that either Brandon Marshall or Alshon are playing, you can use DraftKings late swap, and you can swap out Maclin for Marshall or Alshon, and then you could swap out Martellus for either Zach Ertz or Dwayne Allen, and the prices match up pretty well. If you leave yourself maybe $200 in salary, then you can use that late swap feature, and you can have a super contrarian lineup just by having Brandon Marshall or Alshon in, because a lot of people are gonna fade them. So that's something to keep an eye on today. If you're playing any GPPs, think about getting Martellus and Maclin in your lineup. And if Brandon Marshall and Alshon both don't play, you still have a great play. Martellus is gonna be their red zone target without either of those guys there, and then obviously Maclin is just a great play in that super high scoring match against Indianapolis. So hopefully that didn't get too confusing, but that's a trick you can use this week with DraftKings swap feature to go a little off the board.
Awesome. Thanks, TJ. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for coming on the show, as always.
Thank you for having me, guys.
And just a little breaking news before you go, TJ. I just saw on my phone that Carson Palmer is not going to play.
Wow.
Yeah, so I would definitely fade all the Cardinals. Wow. Even Ellington, I mean, they're going to be able to zero in on him. So, yeah, get the Cardinals out of your daily lineups, guys. It's going to take some tinkering. That's one of those things that's really frustrating with daily fantasy. I mean, you do your research all week, and I like Michael Floyd as a cash game play, and then that breaking news, and you just kind of have to start switching things on the fly. So always make a couple cash game lineups, even if one's a little suboptimal, to have a backup plan. Luckily, I did that this week. I didn't have to do too much tinkering. I had quite a few lineups ready to go. But if you don't do that, then you can find yourself in a bind, especially if you're playing hundreds of contests at once. So, yeah, that's good news. I'm glad you told me that, because now I could submit that for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely going through throughout the rest of the show and taking those Cardinals out there. I had Michael Floyd in quite a lot of quite a few.
Yeah, I had a lot of
but yeah, definitely. Thanks again, TJ, for coming on. You know, you saw, you know, the analysis there with the swapping out and Martellus Bennett, and I mean that's just the stuff that TJ is just great about. I mean,
definitely.
And he knows what to do to make likes to do that. I know I like to, and I did not do that last week. So we're all going to be listening to TJ's advice for to make a little money this week and everything, and to have fun playing daily fantasy. So appreciate it, TJ. Thanks again for coming on, and we'll be sure to have you on every week. Absolutely. All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, TJ. Thanks again.
All right.
You too.
Thank you.
Later.
You too. So, Dan, we're going to, real quick, I guess, move through the matchups that we want to highlight here. So why don't you go ahead and kick that off, and we'll run through.
Yeah, definitely. We'll call this one the Big Five, so you're going to get this every week. Or we'll see, but it looks like you'll be getting every week some matchup plays. Like I mentioned before, me and Matt, this is what we do. We look for matchups through. We have a lot of stats to work with the football guys and Football Focus. So instead of more preamble, I'll just get right into it. You really got to get going with Jake Locker and Justin Hunter this week. To me, this is the premier stack and really a must play in daily fantasy leagues. In FanDuel, Locker is the 17th most expensive quarterback, and Hunter is the 46th most expensive receiver. On DraftKings, Locker is the 14th most expensive quarterback. Hunter is the 52nd most expensive receiver. These are must plays. They have a matchup with a Dallas defense that was as bad as advertised in Week 1 and is only going to get worse. One of their starting linebackers, Justin Durant, injured for the next 3 to 4 weeks. They have to do another swap. And really the root of the defensive struggles come down to their starting cornerbacks. Brandon Carr and Morris Claiborne finished with the worst and 6th worst overall pass coverage grades, according to Pro Football Focus last week. That's not good. Overall, the Dallas Cowboys had the worst pass coverage grade in all Pro Football Focus's game charting. Carr alone allowed plays of 37, 29, and 21 yards to 3 different receivers, one which went for a touchdown. I don't know what happened to Brandon Carr, but it's not pretty. The fact of the matter is, this is a Cowboys defense that is gonna be running into problems all season long. Moving on to why I love Locker and Hunter so much. First, getting into Justin Hunter, he is just getting ready to explode. It is a breakout waiting to happen. I went back, and he was one of the players decided to watch on NFL Game Rewind this week. Watched every target of his, watched every snap basically of his against the Chiefs. I came away thinking that really he could have doubled his output. He turned 8 targets into 3 catches for 63 yards, including a 39-yarder on a fly route where he we lined up some in the slot with a receiver on the outside and just torched a receiver. It took 1 step to the right and got separation within 3 yards on a fly route. He torched the corner. So this is a guy who's ready to break out. As far as Locker goes, the reason I love this matchup is just because, yes, this is a terrible defense, and Locker is a type of quarterback who is better with a clean pocket. Last week, Locker finished 17 of 24 for 208 yards and a touchdown on plays with no pressure against the Chiefs. While under pressure, he finished just 5 of 9 for 58 yards and a touchdown, and he took 4 sacks. So really, you're looking at a player who is much better with a clean pocket. So really, I love both of them, and Vegas loves this matchup too. They have a 49.5 over/under, and this is just one you got to reap the benefits on and let go with your tight ends. Let them go, let them run.
Yeah, absolutely. And just real quick from me on that particular matchup you highlighted, you mentioned Justin Hunter, and that's a great call. Kendall Wright as well. But when we had TJ on talking about these contrarian plays, I've actually put Nate Washington in a few of my daily lineups just because he's one of those players that randomly has a couple good games every year, even though everybody kind of sleeps on him. I think this could be one of those random good games. Because the Dallas defense is so bad, he could actually surprise and have a relatively good fantasy line. And I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, I'm pretty sure he actually played the majority of the snaps last week against the Chiefs. I could be wrong on that, but I remember hearing that somewhere. I did not back check.
He played like close 75-80% of them.
The third, that's good. So you want to highlight?
I'm sorry, Matt. I got to cut off a little bit there. A little bit of a freeze on my end, technically. Can you repeat what you said?
Okay. For today.
I lost you there, Matt. Hold on 1 second. Back this. Sorry, my computer must be the root of this problem. Can't hear what you're saying there, Matt. Little technical difficulties,
sure.
Guys.
I'll just go ahead and highlight one of them. And this is not necessarily a fantasy matchup per se, but we mentioned Cam Newton earlier in the Lions game. The Carolina's playing the Detroit Lions, and so what I'm thinking is, I want to see how the Carolina defensive line matches up with the Detroit offensive line. And so, like I said, that's not really a fantasy matchup per se, but I think it could have a big effect on Matthew Stafford, he looked great in Week 1. He really looked like in some ways he looked like a different player. He was making some good decisions. Really was moving around well. He looked like he'd worked a lot on his leg strength in the off season. And Drew Brees, of course, Matt Stafford has Drew Brees is one of his former offensive assistants. Joe Lombardi is now there. He's from the Saints, and Brees has always been great about having really a lot of powerful movements in his legs to get away from rushers and move through the pocket. It looked like Stafford had worked a lot on that. So he looked great in Week 1, and conversely, Calvin Johnson, who always looks great, he had a monster game. So I'm interested to see if and Detroit is on their now, and Charles Johnson is Carolina's left defensive end. He's a really good player. He's a good passer, a ton of good players. So I just see, I'm not so sure. He definitely, you kind of when he made Calvin Johnson. The second one was probably when he, threw across his body over the middle, but he still made it happen. Ready to kind of pencil Stafford in as the fourth guy right after the elite. Rodgers, Brees, Manning. I think where it happens throughout the season, and I think Carolina could give him a few problems today.
Yeah, luckily I got you back, Matt. It looks like you're back on my end. I'm hearing you fine now again, which is great.
Good.
So I'm just going to jump right into the next matchup. We're going to highlight the third matchup. This is the Colts and the Eagles. This is another one I really like for daily fantasy leagues. I like to roll with Luck here, T.Y. Hilton, and potentially Reggie Wayne or Hakeem Nicks if you want to roll with a multiple skill position player stack. As I mentioned before earlier in the podcast, earlier in the hangout, I'm sorry, that the Eagles are a type of team that pump the game flow of the game, and they make their opponent have more offensive snaps as they have more offensive snaps. I mentioned that with the Jaguars last week. So I think that you're going to see a lot of snaps from the Colts offense, which is great news for Luck and Hilton. And more importantly, I think you're going to see a lot of passes. Last week, I was really impressed with the job that a combination of Brandon Graham and Trent Cole did at right outside linebacker in the Eagles 3-4 of setting the edge. They both graded out really positively in Pro Football Focus as well, so I was not just crazy seeing it when I watched the game. They were great in run defense grades, so they really did a job setting that edge. So I think they're going to do it again. They're going to stop the Colts run game, and the Colts are going to have to move to that 11 personnel, no huddle, spread offense, shotgun, throw it around. Reason I really like Hilton the most in this one is that I think Hilton's going to see some coverage on the outside with Cary Williams, the Eagles' outside cornerback, because Cary plays mostly right cornerback. T.Y. Hilton will play a lot of X with Reggie Wayne kicking into the slot on 11 personnel when they have Wayne, Nicks, and Hilton on the field. And Cary Williams was the guy who gave up the big plays last week to Allen Hurns. This is the guy. He had a bad pass coverage grade last year, according to Pro Football Focus. He had a really bad one Week 1 because he gave those huge plays to Hurns. And I'm really not sold on Malcolm Jenkins as this team's safety and the threat back there to guard the deep half of the field. So I love the Colts in this matchup. As far as the Eagles go, last week we had that interesting question: Darren Sproles or if you want to start Darren Sproles or Kelvin Benjamin. Matt took Benjamin's side. He had a great week. I took Sproles' side because I thought he'd have a big workload. He had a great week also, so you didn't really go wrong with whoever you listen to.
Win-win.
Yeah, win-win, exactly. So
that's how smart we both are.
Yeah, there you go. This week I also said that C.J. Fedorowicz would be a good daily play, though that one didn't work out too well.
I wasn't going to bring that up.
Yeah, I brought it up. It's all right. Anyway, so back to the Eagles. I really want to see what's going on with this offense now that they're down Evan Mathis at left guard and they're down to their third string right tackle with Alan Barber done for the year, the backup right tackle, the Lane Johnson who's suspended for another few games. So really, I'm interested to see what's going to happen with this offense. it is a pretty foolproof system to the point where I think it can be not as dominant without a dominant offensive line, but at the same time still pretty good. So I think that you're going to see a high-scoring game, a shootout. Vegas thinks this also, and I'm really interested in this matchup. Matt?
A lot of great points there. This one has the potential for a ton of fantasy points. It's two good offenses going together and two bad defenses. So one more matchup for me that I want to highlight, and we'll finish off with one from Dan. I'm really interested to see the Cincinnati Bengals playing the Atlanta Falcons. I think we saw the running back split was pretty heavily favored towards Gio Bernard on the Bengals side, and I like that. I think Bernard's a great player. I hyped him up a lot this offseason as a pretty good bet for a top 10 finish at the position. So that's nice that we really see some of those workload questions on his end answered. I'm really excited to see him against his front seven. It's a pretty good run-stopping unit, but at the same time, he's a really good pass catcher. I don't think they have the linebackers there to cover him. And if you were on Twitter this week, there were a few people capturing some really great plays of Bernard, getting some screens from the slot, split out wide and stuff like that. They really want to use him as a pass catcher, and I think that's where he could shine this game. But at the same time, I'm also kind of thinking that Jeremy Hill could be a good play this week. They only got him 4 carries last week, but I think that Hugh Jackson wants that to change. He kind of I heard that he openly said to Hill, like, don't worry, he will be more involved going forward. So that's good to see for Hill's sake. He's a guy that is really a punishing runner, so they're going to need to get a lead kind of for him to really hit his ceiling, which probably won't happen in this game. So not so much saying that Hill's going to be a great play. I mean, he potentially could be, but I'm really interested to just see how the two split the workload, how that situation continues to develop. And I think this is a front seven that they could win against, while they added guys like Tyson Jackson and Paul Soliai, who are big run defenders. They didn't look that great against the run to me in week 1, and I still think that these linebackers are exploitable. So I really want to see how Gio Bernard and Jeremy Hill split that workload. If they continue to use Bernard in such creative and interesting ways, he could still provide those explosive plays. So that's one. I think there's a lot of fantasy gold in that matchup too. Andy Dalton is a cheap daily play. Matt Ryan looks like he's establishing himself as a big-time quarterback for the season. And A.J. Green could really, really eat against this Falcons secondary. So, there's a lot of fantasy gold in that matchup. But particularly I want to see how the workload is split up between the two Bengals running backs and also how they look against this front seven.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of great points there. I actually I'm basically running a strategy where I'm basically streaming quarterbacks in my main auction league. It's one QB league. We don't draft too many backups. This year, this is the most backups ever drafted. So stream Palmer week 1. I'm streaming Dalton this week. Looking forward to that for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. I'll get into the last matchup, though, and then we'll wrap up if any questions happen and get you guys set for week 1. Last matchup I'm going to take is the Giants and Cardinals. So obviously the breaking news Matt brought up is that Carson Palmer's not going to play. I will say this, before he even was ruled out of this game, I did not like him this week as a fantasy play. Meanwhile, everybody else did like him. You can look at that Giants game and say that Stafford torched that pass defense, which is definitely somewhat true. But 2 of the big plays were a broken coverage that he just rolled out, and as Matt mentioned before, created the play with his legs. And the other was one where he broke a sack, ran to his left 6 yards, and threw across his body to Calvin Johnson in the back of the end zone for a touchdown. So really, I think that this pass defense is better than people think with the Giants, with Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie and Walter Thurman added. JPP looked active and not like his 2011 self, but the closest we've seen it in a while. And really, it goes back to the stats I mentioned last week that my colleague at Pro Football Focus, Pat Thorman, pointed out this offseason. Carson Palmer is a different quarterback under pressure and not under pressure, and that whole offense really works like that, the way it's set up with its vertically attacking style. So yes, week one he had the Chargers, who can't really generate a pass rush, still can't. This week the Giants are going to get more pressure, and I think that it's going to be obvious. But obviously now with Palmer out, Drew Stanton's in. He's not as bad as people think as far as a talent perspective goes, but we really haven't seen much of him in the regular season, so I would downgrade all my Cardinals plays. As far as the Giants go, I think they're going to run the ball better than they did last week on offense. I think Jennings is a great play this week for that reason. This is a Cardinals defense that lost Darnell Dockett to injury. This is a defense that lost inside linebackers Darrell Washington and Carlos Dansby from last year, and they're going to get exploited at some point in the run game. Ryan Matthews had a solid game on his touches. I think Jennings can really do well this week. So that's my take for the Giants-Cardinals game, Matt.
Yeah, that's a good point about Stanton is that he is he's a guy who's played well at times during his career,
Yes.
in the preseason, and he knows Bruce Arians' system, backwards and forwards, man. That's a good call. He could keep these Cardinals players relevant, but I do think you should err on the side of caution there, especially in money leagues and everything like that. So yeah, that's some good points there from you, Dan. And I don't think we have too many more questions to wrap up with. I did get one while we were talking. Finesse King on Twitter at @T_Dub_Raw. He asks us Edelman, Gerhardt, or Keenan Allen for the flex spots. Or what about Keenan Allen or Anquan Bolden? Or no, excuse me. Allen or Anquan Bolden for wide receiver 2. So I guess we're picking between the 4 of these guys: Edelman, Gerhardt, Keenan Allen, or Anquan Bolden.
Interesting. So if we're going 2 of 4 here, assuming that was there anything designation on if it's PPR standard, Matt?
I'm pretty sure it's standard, just from
okay.
talking to him before.
All right. So in the standard league here, I really just can't get on board with advising to play Allen this week against the Seahawks. I don't love what I saw from the Chargers in week 1, especially from their offensive line. The Cardinals just blitzed them and really got a ton of pressure on them. That interior line is injured and just not great right now. I think it's going to affect that whole offense. So I would say I would bench Allen from the start. I mentioned before why I would start Gerhardt. I know you're very anti-running back here, Matt, but I would still go with Gerhardt just based on the matchup. It's just too good for me to pass up. Who are the other 2 options? I'm sorry, Matt.
Anquan Bolden and Julian Edelman.
Okay, so in a standard league, this is definitely a little harder. Because normally I would say Edelman in half-point or full-point PPR. I'm gonna go with Edelman anyway here. I really just like his involvement in this offense. I know Bolden is also involved in the offense, but I just think you're going to get more yards out of Edelman. What are your thoughts, Matt?
I'm going to go with Bolden as one of them. I really like Anquan Bolden this week. I'm not sold on the Chicago defense. Their run defense in particular, but their secondary as well. I'm still not sold there. So I'm definitely going Anquan Bolden with in the wide receiver 2 spot, and in the flex. I'm not crazy about any of the other players, honestly.
I don't think your dog is either.
No, he's upset.
He didn't like that. He didn't like that. He's not that second spot. He's not into it.
No, he's not crazy about any of the options there. He's getting a little howl on. So I think actually I agree with you, and I would go with Toby Gerhardt there in the flex spot because for volume's sake, I like that. And, I'm not interested in playing Keenan Allen against the Seahawks either. Nor am I crazy about Edelman in a standard league. So, yeah, I think I'd go with Gerhardt in the flex spot and Anquan Bolden in the wide receiver 2 spot. So, there's my answer with that. We got a few more questions just now.
Nice, perfect.
Andre Ellington, Joique Bell, Eric Decker, half-point PPR. Pick one of them. What do you think there?
Yeah, so I went into this earlier why I'm sticking with Decker for this one. I do love Joique. If you guys follow me on Sportable, I did a piece earlier, which was like our big prediction piece, where I basically said I think Joique was the most undervalued player in all of fantasy football this year in the pre-draft process. I stand by that, but he's going against a Carolina front seven that may very well be the best in the league. I think they proved that again last week. they're just too good with Kuechly and Thomas Davis to add to that front four. So in this one, to me, it's just a matchup thing. I still, like I mentioned before, why I like Decker. I don't love the Green Bay defense. I don't love Dom Capers scheming for them. They're really just giving up chunks of yards and chunk plays game after game after game for the past 3 years. So yeah, Decker's my play.
Yeah.
Matt, you there?
I'm here. Just seeing this now come across the news wire. Since you mentioned Carolina's front seven, Greg Hardy's not going to play today.
Wow, they deactivated him, huh?
Yeah, looks like he is deactivated. And it makes a lot of sense. We've seen it. Not to get into this on the show, but we've seen so many social issues with NFL players. The Ravens releasing Ray Rice, Adrian Peterson getting deactivated today, and it looks like the Panthers are following suit with Greg Hardy, which honestly they couldn't let him play. With everything that's going on there,
yes.
The public pressure would have just been too much. So Hardy is not going to play. And we mentioned the Detroit Carolina matchup up front earlier. So that's a big news there. So I don't think obviously you're playing in IDP. Fantasy football, but yeah, on the field. Anyways, as for my answer to the question, I'm gonna go with Joik. I think he's he's just a little bit better than Reggie Bush right now because he gets the goal line carries and he has just as much upside as a pass catcher. This is a guy, and I think he's going to have a nice game today against the Panthers front seven. I think you're looking for more of a sustaining more of a guy who can sustain the offense than a big play threat like Reggie Bush. I think he's a good play for one spot, and Eric Decker is my other option as well. I think you've really highlighted how he can. That's a big one for me. And yeah, I'm kind of waiting to see what we. Excuse me. That hurt. It's going to be a while until we see that explosive Andre Ellington, and with Carson Palmer out, I think that's a big deal too. So, at the what on Twitter, there's your answer. I think you played Joik and Eric Decker. And last question we got before we get out of here. This is from the Football Observer on Twitter at Chris Lomas. Pick one: Justin Hunter, Alshon Jeffrey, or Victor Cruz, non-PPR. Dan, I think I know where you're going to go with this, but who are you taking out of those two?
Yeah, so opposite of those three with Jeffrey in case he maybe does end up playing. Obviously, I went into why I'm going Justin Hunter. In case you didn't hear it, I would just say double back on this link that we send, and it's towards the end of the show I go over why I really love Hunter this week. As far as why I like him more than the other options, Jeffrey's hurt. We don't know what's going to happen there. It doesn't seem like he's going to play based on the fact that the Bears added a few players from their practice squad. And then moving on to Victor Cruz, I think Cruz will see a lot of Patrick Peterson today. I don't love that matchup. Peterson doesn't always play in the slot, but I just feel like Cruz is going to have to play a little more outside receiver today if the Giants can't get anything going with Jernigan again on the outside, just to move this offense a little bit. So I don't love the matchup there. I still can't trust this Giants passing offense until I see something more and just see that Eli and the receivers are syncing up in McAdoo's scheme. So to me, this is a very easy one, and I go Hunter 100%.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you and go Hunter there as well. So the big thing here is that you have a lot of upside with Hunter, playing the Dallas defense. I don't think you can really safely play Alshon Jeffrey this week. Every indication is that he is going to miss this game. It would be a big surprise game. I don't think you can trust. I don't think you can trust that he's gonna be in your lineup enough that if you don't have an alternative from the Monday night game, I don't think you can play him. And feel safe about not getting a zero there. And as for Victor Cruz, that Giants offense is just a mess right now. It looks really bad. They don't seem to be in sync with each other, and it just looks like they're not adjusting to the new offense. And his quarterback is not very good right now at all anymore. I think the end is near for Eli Manning. I'm sorry to say it.
I do not co-sign on that. I will.
I think the end is near for Eli Manning, and but I can see Dan vehemently disagrees with me, but that's fine. We'll see.
Not vehemently. This is the first time I've ever been worried about him as a Giants fan, dating back to 2004 when he first came onto the team. I knew what I saw early on and never wavered, but this is definitely the first time I'm worried about him. Just to do one little bit on him, is just I've never seen him this feeling pressure that's not there thing that he's doing now is really bad. It's it's basically just the years of now having this pathetic offensive line that was built by Jerry Reese, where he kept pushing money back on the contracts of David Boss and Chris Snee and David Deal to the point where they were guaranteed money down the line, uncuttable, and just injured. So this interior line is a little better. It has newer players, but at the same time they're not playing well right now. And Eli is not mobile, so he really needs a clean pocket to be good. So what it comes down to is what Matt says. He sees Eli, the decline of Eli. I say we need to wait more. Let's see if he can get a clean pocket and a good X receiver back with Beckham. But that's it for now on that.
I hear you. I mean, the thing with Eli is that he's been in the same offense his entire career.
Yeah.
And now he's switching to a system that honestly couldn't be any more different than the one he was in.
Right.
And I don't think it really fits him as a player. But anyway, so that's more what I'm worried about, and that it might take half the season to get this thing figured out, get them all in the same place, and by then it might be too late.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we won't make Dan feel too bad about the Giants. But yeah, so. I'm pretty sure that's all. Oh, well, we have one more question here. And so Roger Syracuse at RBQs on Twitter, he wants to know Joique Bell or Sean Green today. What do you think?
Yeah, so I've touched on both these players today, but I'll get back into both of them. As much as I don't like the matchup for Joique Bell against the Panthers front seven, I think and as much as I like the Sean Green matchup against the Dallas Cowboys defense, I think this is one where you can kind of put the matchup aside and just say, listen, Joique Bell is a better player. He's a better talent. He's on a better offense. He has a much better chance to score because of that. And while Green is going to have probably his greatest opportunity to get 7 this week, get touchdowns on the board against this Dallas defense, it's really just a matter of talent here for me. I can't play a guy like Green over Bell, regardless of the matchup.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The matchup is great for Sean Green, but I'm still gonna play the more superior player on a better team with Joique Bell. I think he has some good touchdown upside today too, so I'm not gonna risk it with playing Sean Green. So that's all our questions, and that's all we have today on episode 2 of Hot Takes and Hot Cakes, provided by a great website that everybody should check out. Really short, brief content that you can kind of get on the go. The site looks great on mobile. Anybody that's watching now or watches later on today, you got to check out Sportable. There's writers, including Dan and myself, I guess. I guess I fall into that category. But yeah, so definitely check out Sportable. And Dan and I will be back here every week. We're gonna just be providing the hot takes with your hot cakes here in the morning. Any fantasy questions you have, feel free to shoot us during the week, and we'll get to them here on the show. So, any closing words from you, Dan?
Yeah, just to wrap it up on my end, thanks again for all the questions, guys. You guys tweeted us back. Thanks for answering them. That's what we're here to do. That's what we want to do. The more questions, the better. Keep them coming. Ask as many as you need. Ask them throughout the week. Ask them on the day of. It doesn't matter. We'll answer them. Trade questions, lineup questions, everything fantasy football. This is our second show. I hope it went a little smoother than last week from a technical standpoint. I hope we got some great points across here to help you for this week. And I just want to touch a little bit more on Sportable, because you may not know Sportable, and that's who's hosting this podcast. And that's who me and Matt both write for. And basically the idea behind Sportable is to basically get the fantasy points across in a more concise way. So we have cards up on the site. Instead of articles, it's cards. So these are basically like a long form version of a tweet where we tackle the question, we get in points, and we sometimes put it out for you guys to answer an opinion question. So we'll talk about the breakout of Justin Hunter, and we'll ask you where will he finish, wide receiver 1, 2, 3. So you can get involved, and you can talk in the comments, talk to all of us, And really what separates Sportable, I think, is the writers, though. Sal Stepp and I, the guy who started it and the guy who's running Sportable for us right now, our boss, he collected a great group of us. So you have me, Matt. We're not going to speak for ourselves, but besides that, we've got TJ who came on earlier, and you saw what he can do with Daly, what he offers. We have other great guys, Jeremy Hart, just names that come to mind right now. Just got in 2 new people. Christian, who's running most of the player blurbs, he's been there the whole time. They just got on Jessica Kleinschmidt. She's great. I've followed some of her work recently since she started. And I mean, you really have a stable of 10 to 15 industry people who are just moving up and really doing their research and doing their work each week. And they're the ones writing these cards, and they're the ones who are, picking up on the player blurbs and the quotes in the media and making their decisions and opinions on fantasy based on informed decisions. So really check out Sportable. It's great. We'll be here every week. It's a little bit long-winded there, Matt, but that's my closing thoughts.
All well said. No need to be brief when we're coming to talk about Sportable.
There you go.
We know they are. We've got a good crew going there, and it's a great site. I think everybody will really like it if they haven't checked it out yet. But anyway, so yeah, that's all from us. Thanks again for tuning in live or later on, and come back every week. We're ready to answer questions. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.